Hello, you're watching India Post Live. I'm Nilanjana, and today we are going to talk about an issue which is now a grim reality, and it is time we recognize that it is a grim reality. Each and every citizen of the world is going to be affected by the effects of climate change. Let us take a look how.
Dr. R.K. Pachauri, chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, had said at Yokohama in Japan that soaring carbon emissions will intensify a number of risks for mankind, including conflict, hunger, floods, and migration this century. The IPCC report forecasts a global average temperature rise between 0.3 degrees Celsius and 4.8 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. Describing the report as the most solid evidence available, Michael Jarraw of the World Meteorological Organization said that, "We are at the point where we have so much information, so much evidence, we can no longer plead ignorance. We have the information to make decisions." The Kyoto Protocol, adopted by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1997, allows emissions of developing countries to grow in accordance with their development needs. However, many developed countries are crying foul over India and China's carbon emissions. Reduction in carbon dioxide emissions means a reduction in the level of income and a decline in GDP. So should India and China stick to the Kyoto Protocol?
All right. To talk more about climate change and the effects of global warming, I have with me Neha Sinha, who's Advocacy and Policy Officer of the Bombay Natural History Society. I also have Kartikeya Singh, who's the founder of the Indian Youth Climate Network. Welcome, both of you, to the studio. Thank you so much to the conversation. You can join the conversation. Just log in and you can talk to us through Skype. You can talk to us through Google Hangout. And also you can tweet in your comments at India Post Live. Let me start with you, Neha. Increasing forest fires, sea level rise, US recorded its highest temperature in 2012. How grim is the issue?
I think it's a very grim issue, and it often gets portrayed only as an environmental issue, but clearly it is not. It is an issue to do with human health, it is an issue to do with the health of biodiversity, and we are all dependent on biodiversity. If we have increase or decrease in temperature, and if we have change in the geochemical cycles of the ecosystems that we are all part of, then agriculture will get impacted, the way we look at food security will get impacted. So this is really an issue that's more than environment. It is about our health, it is about our food, it is also about political challenges. If we have human migrations because of worsening temperature and climate conditions, then that's going to be a grim political reality. And the countries of the world which are the poorest are also the hottest countries. And most of the south is poor, most of the countries around the equator are poor.
Yes.
And let's take an example of the Sundarbans Delta, for instance, which already has witnessed a couple of islands going down. In the Indian part of Sundarbans, a couple of islands have vanished in the past few years. So if you have more human migration in India and Bangladesh, you can just see how difficult it would be politically as well. So this is an issue with many dimensions. It's not just environmental, it's an issue for every government of the world to answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Karthik, 6 million people expected to be dead by 2030 because of issues related to global warming.
Yeah, well, Nilanjana, let me start by saying you mentioned that this is a challenge that is going to affect everyone. I think I would say that this is affecting everyone. You know, the latest IPCC report suggests that between 2000 and 2010, the average global temperatures increased faster than the previous decades, and that by 2050, and this is the alarm bells really, that we need to reduce global average emissions by 40 to 70%. So it's time to get serious. And The impacts are very real. Neha just mentioned challenges facing us here in our own country. Just a few weeks ago, we had the first climate refugees in the Pacific Islands leaving their homes. We're talking about entire nation states being threatened by this challenge. So death and tragedies, displacement aside, this is an issue that's going to affect everyone. And it is time to wake up and address this issue head on.
Another thing that kind of seems to bother me is that there is a lot of denial to this issue. In fact, huge corporates, let me again ask you that question, huge corporates have been spending money to get scientists to prove otherwise the effects of global change, the climate change and global warming.
Yeah, this has been really unfortunate. There have been individuals, I mean, corporates aside, there have been in the United States, there have been a lot of calls and awareness around particularly the Koch brothers and the Koch industries that have funneled billions of dollars towards the climate denial machinery. And sadly, this has impacted global dialogue on climate change. We are made to believe that there is no scientific consensus around the fact that there is an issue on climate change and that it's human-induced, where the latest report in the IPCC most unequivocally states that it is human-induced.
Yes.
And we are hopefully awareness around individuals and corporates having funneled the climate denial machine can begin to have other machines now being put against that climate denial machinery and really recognize the climate reality that is present today. But you're right, we have lost a lot of time in climate denial and we cannot afford that.
Right. Talking about time, the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, let's talk a little bit about that. The US came out of it in 2001. The United States, has less than 5% of the total world population, yet 20% of carbon emissions. Don't you think that somehow a country which is technologically so advanced, a nation which is so rich, needs to take some responsibility to reduce carbon emissions?
Yeah, in fact, the United States is famous in never ratifying the Kyoto Protocol.
Yes.
The Kyoto Protocol itself is coming to an end now, and perhaps we need to look at new mechanisms that look at technology transfer and sharing of regimes of technologies, especially to developing countries. And I think it works both ways. Large developing countries like India and China have also been saying, what are we going to do because we're developing, which is also not fair, because while India has a lot of problems within India, India also cannot shirk the responsibility, being such a large polluter and having also certain very rich sectors which need to take responsibility, such as polluter pays principle. So yes, the US and as well as some of the other countries such as Japan or Canada or New Zealand, famously, who have always tried to shirk responsibility, need to take more responsibility. They need to take ownership, and we are the sort of countries which bear a history of not having developed in the way that other countries have developed. But we all need to maybe work towards a regime where we have technology transfer, and it works in a way that if you don't join, then you don't get the privileges of that transfer. And
the economics of it is what I think is the stumbling block, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would say that has the regime that has been in place was well intended,
Yes.
but it only entrenched a north-south divide that we could not, as the last 20 years have shown in the process, could not overcome. And as a result, today we have a climate regime with incredible trust deficit, and the clock ticking, and not enough action been taken. So if we do not get substantial progress in the climate negotiations in Paris in December of 2015, then perhaps there is time for the UNFCCC framework to consider a new protocol, one where countries get something by signing up, one for clean energy access per se that helps large-scale deployment of the kinds of energy technologies that we need and spur the innovation that the world needs to address this issue.
How do you see markets emerging for new low-emission technology in India? How do you see the market emerging?
Well, I would say that recent reports are coming out saying that the prices of solar are finally coming down to
Yes.
levels that are competitive. In a country where we have rolling blackouts, we've often seen companies and your local shops using diesel generators. But for the first time, the price point between diesel for generators has crossed having solar as a backup power generation source coupled with inverters. So the technology is headed in the right place. We need strong policies to send signals to the market to have more people buy into that market.
The political will, as it were.
Yes, we in fact have a national action plan on climate change, and one of the reasons why solar has not taken off the way it has is because we're still thinking about what technologies within solar to use. But once we have economies of scale, once we have a really strong intent, we have a deadline for a solar plan, but it was still 2020. So maybe we need to work very hard to ensure that this deadline is kept, or even try to get solar, much more scaled up solar even before 2020, so that the economies of scale come in and the price comes down. So all these perverse subsidies, as you call it, for kerosene and diesel, which are fueling generators across the country and are so polluting, they need to go. And I would say we need to have much more solar on the grid, on the energy grid, off grid if there is no grid, but if you have load shedding, you should definitely have solar as a backup instead of having a noisy, polluting diesel generator. Which is the norm today all over.
And the market exists, Nilanjana. It's
Yes.
we're talking about a nation within a nation. We have approximately 400 million people without access to electricity,
Yes.
and that is your market. And people
But
who
how
will
many
need
people
to
can
be
afford the solar panels?
No, the government has to help them, which is why we are saying political will.
Right.
So economies of scale, if the government says we are only going to work, we're going to work mainly on grid solar, then they have to cut down the prices.
At the same time, people are willing to pay for energy. I mean, research shows that no matter how poor you are, whether it be through government subsidy, there's a whole black market for kerosene. So
Yes.
energy is something that people are willing to pay for. It's just that subsidies need to become technology agnostic in order to level the playing field. So it's not just going for kerosene, but maybe you'd spend that money on some other energy source that
like
might
solar.
be cleaner.
Yes.
Right. Let's talk of the ordinary citizens. Now, global warming, temperature rise, chlorofluorocarbons, ACs, refrigerators, these things are no longer science. These things have become general knowledge now. But this has only happened over the past decade or decade and a half, max. How do you think the local people can be sensitized to the issue of global warming? Let me ask you first, as founder of Indian Youth.
There was a survey released in 2011 by the Yale Project on Climate Communication that did a survey across the spectrum, both urban and rural, on climate change in the Indian mind. And it found that only 7% of the people that they surveyed knew a lot about global warming.
Yes.
41% had no idea what it was.
Right.
But once they were told what it was, 75% of the people believed, I believe that was the figure, that they knew that it was affecting them.
Yes.
So it's really about framing of the issue in this country. Climate change in India has not simply been about CO2 in the atmosphere and warming. It has been linked integrally to the country's development.
And lifestyle.
And lifestyle.
Yes.
People recognize waste management issues, water scarcity issues, food security, general ambient air pollution, and they club that into the broader context of the environmental and climate discourse. So they may not know climate, but they certainly understand environmental degradation. And I know that there's been compulsory environmental science education in this country up to 10th standard. And I think that has started to make the younger population a little bit more aware of the issue. But we need to have more public discourse and recognize how it's affecting us here.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think what a lot of climate deniers do is they keep saying that it's not scientifically proven, which is not true. It has been proven. But there's a lot of space also to discuss anecdotes and discuss the way people experience climate, the way people experience temperatures. And there's so much traditional knowledge in this country. I mean, if you were to think of your own grandmother telling you about how it was when she was growing up, what was the temperature like, when did the rains come, and everybody will unequivocally
Now
say
there are
temperatures going up.
catastrophic shifts in weather patterns.
Exactly, right? We are not able to predict what's going to happen.
Yes.
Bangalore is hotter, Delhi is hotter, Bombay is hotter.
Yes.
You can't exist without air conditioning, and that wasn't the way it was when our parents were growing up. Species are disappearing. Sparrows have disappeared from Delhi and other cities. You know, in the high altitude regions, animals are moving up the mountain because it's getting too warm for them.
Right.
Flowers are flowering earlier. You know, things like that are happening, and there's so much traditional knowledge which does not get captured because at some level the discourse is very far away from the way people experience their lives, you know.
You talked of migration, which is all right, but how many people actually realize that climate change and global warming is actually leading to health issues? I mean,
yes,
diarrhea,
that's a very good point. That's a very good
waterborne
point.
diseases. I mean, how many people are actually aware?
Yeah, dengue. Yeah, dengue.
Yes,
Yeah.
dengue is Hindi, dengue is
Yeah,
English,
yes.
I believe. That's another.
Yeah, no, but that is the reality, right? I mean, we've seen just in this last year record-breaking dengue outbreaks,
Absolutely.
and you know, we're even seeing that happen in temperate climates where malaria and dengue is on the rise, and that is something that we need to link.
But yes,
to warming.
and who is linking that? Who is taking the onus? Who's taking the responsibility to do that?
These are the diseases that were known to be tropical diseases on the tropical belt, and they're now
Yes.
moving to colder countries.
Yes.
And there is some research that suggests that there is a direct link between rising temperature and rise in diseases. And of course, we don't know enough, but that should not stop us. You know, there's something known as the precautionary principle, which says that just don't do something that's bad for the environment if you don't know even if you don't know the impacts, and even if you don't know exactly what is causing it, try to err on the side of caution. Like, try to have precautions. So do not pollute. Try to look at different energy sources, for instance, and try to be part of a healthy functioning ecosystem. So deniers can keep denying climate change, but the fact is that it's affecting our lives. We may never understand in exactly how many ways it's affecting our health, the way we are living our life today. But that should give us more impetus to do something.
But there is also a certain amount of good news. The IPCC, I believe, has also said that the situation has not completely gone out of our hands, and the fact that, you know, if emission can be controlled, then the increase in global temperature can also be controlled. What is the practical way out?
Well,
you said Kyoto Protocol is anyway going to come to an end if, in Paris by 2015, if, things don't fall in
A new protocol probably.
Yes. So what do you see happening now?
and I applaud the IPCC for being optimistic, because we need that optimism in order to move forward. And I think that really does require policies and the political will to create the policies that transition our market for that clean energy revolution that we need. And globally, that can take the form of a clean energy access protocol. But at the same time, some of the solutions that are being suggested include geoengineering, which requires dumping millions of tons of iron fillings into the ocean to get the oceans to suck up more carbon dioxide, or increasing aerosols in the atmosphere. It's sad that we have arrived at this point, and that there are experiments that are being conducted to tame climate change in this way. But I think we need more solutions, policies that support solutions that we know won't jeopardize our climate stability even further.
So, it's the history of the world that whenever you start a new technology, it is expensive. At some point before the Industrial Revolution, coal was expensive, right? So today solar is expensive, but it's not going to be expensive forever if you have political will.
It's coming down.
It's already come down. So
Great.
I think the key will be energy agreements to look at new forms of energy, getting new forms of energy.
And remaining technology agnostic, because I think that will really spur the most innovation that we need.
We have another member to join us on Skype. She's Alpana, and she's former energy campaigner, Greenpeace Bangalore. Alpana, welcome to India Post Live. Thank you so much for joining. You have been listening to the conversation. We are talking about the realities, the fact that we need to really wake up, all of us, every single citizen needs to wake up to the grim reality of global warming and climate change. What are your first thoughts on this matter, on this issue?
Well, I think with the with all the IPCC reports that have come out, and particularly this one where the scientists in IPCC have been really, really cautious and careful to look at the kind of research that that have studied climate change, and then they've also done a lot of work around it and have come out with their results. So I think that we have cause for concern, like they said. They've also said that there is hope. There is hope, and I think that needs to be taken seriously. But unfortunately, in spite of all these warnings, in spite of scientific consensus on climate change and global warming, uh, there does not seem to be any political will.
Right.
There does not seem to be any there does not seem to be any public interest on the issue or public concern on that issue, where people are following it and urging their governments to take action on climate change. So I think it's going to be a tough task. We have the science.
It is a daunting task ahead, wouldn't you agree? Because as you said, and as even both of you agree, the people don't seem to really care. I mean, even though when you educate them, yes, they do seem to wake up. But who is really? Are we really making people aware of the grimness of the stark realities that we are about to face?
I think there are two aspects to this. I think one, just taking off from the point Karthikeya made about not being too much gloom and doom. Because
yes,
if we just talk about gloom and doom, then I think you reach a point of stasis where nobody moves. So it's important to say, yes, there's a problem, but also we can together find a solution. But many of the solutions to climate change have to be state-led. What we need are these big changes in the way we consume energy and the kind of energy that we use. If we move towards cleaner energy, then emissions will come down. And the other thing is, every person is a stakeholder. So turning off your light, something as simple, turning off the tap when you're brushing your teeth, turning off the light if you're not using it.
Those ads we do see on television.
We do see those
ads.
Yes.
We do definitely see those ads. But why don't you tell us, Arpana, what else? What else can we do? What more can we do as ordinary citizens? You are an energy campaigner yourself. What do you think you can do to ensure that at every individualistic level, all of us are making that little bit of an effort? I mean, the whole saying about every drop makes up,
yes.
The ocean. So as a campaigner yourself, what do you suggest?
See, there are a lot of steps that you can take as an individual to ensure that you do your bit, starting from ensuring that you have energy efficient appliances in your homes. Whether it's LED, CFL for lighting instead of tube lights and incandescent bulbs, to now you have 5-star rated ACs, fridge, and microwaves. So ensure that your power consumption comes down, because most of India's power comes from coal. But, so there are a lot of steps that can be taken where you ensure that you're using your waste as much as possible. You're not using too much of plastic. You try to use public transport. So a lot of steps are there and people know, and it has been discussed. But I think the real change will, again, like everybody was talking about, will happen at the policy level. And that's just not about pushing clean energy. It's also about taking subsidies out of fossil fuels. It's about fossil fuels are cheaper and look very attractive because they are subsidized to a large extent. There are a lot of hidden subsidies involved. So I think you need to look at subsidies in a very, very positive way, where you slowly and gradually remove subsidies, ensuring that it does not hit the poor again, because that's another issue that happens. For example, liquid petroleum gas in India is highly subsidized. And there are a lot of protests in the middle class about it being getting expensive. But there are a lot of issues around subsidies making fossil fuels cheaper and making them look attractive as compared to renewable energy. So that's one policy decision. The second is, at the policy level, you have to take maybe something like a co-benefits approach, which looks at mitigation as well as adaptation. So, for example, rural electrification through renewable energy. If that happens, then while you are ensuring that energy access is improving in India, but you are also ensuring that their adaptation capability increases because they have electricity. They can be much more productive. Life becomes much more easier.
That's a very good
health
point you
is-
made. You talked of rural electrification through renewable energy, but again, for that, you need political will. You need a policy, a state-owned policy for that. Where do you think India is going with this?
Well, it's interesting because India has had a series of electricity acts or acts
Yeah.
affecting our national policy on electrification,
Yes.
and repeated political targets to expand electricity access to as many people as possible. And I think the latest one supposedly expired in 2012, the Rajiv Gandhi Vidyutikaran Yojana. But unfortunately, the electricity supply is erratic. So even if you have access to the grid, you don't have access to the power coming through it. Perhaps policies that allow entrepreneurs to go and set up microgrids that might be grid ready, but microgrids that are driving electricity through, getting electricity through renewables, and they have the insurance that they can recoup costs in case the grid ever reaches those corners, and those microgrids are ready to be connected to the main grid. These kinds of policies might really see people, entrepreneurs, mid-level entrepreneurs, partaking in this market to expand energy access.
There is so much of corruption. There is so much of corruption, at every level. There is so much of red tapeism. There is so much of
Yes.
corruption.
Of course.
I mean, I personally think it's a very, very difficult task to actually achieve what you're saying.
Because there's so many lobbies that exist. There's a very
Exactly.
strong coal lobby in India.
Yes.
But I guess we have to do this. There's no. Do we have time? Do we have an option? No, not really. We really have to give an impetus to local entrepreneurship, as you're saying, because I don't think the grid in the next few years can reach everybody.
No,
it's not
it
possible.
won't. And if it does, then India is a fossil fuel poor country. We import 70%
import our
of our
coal
oil. So
more.
these subsidies that were mentioned, we don't understand that it's threatening India's national security, really. And we will become more addicted to oil in the coming decades. Our coal is trapped between our last forests.
Yes.
And so really we are at a dilemma where we must innovate our way out of this. It's a country of entrepreneurs. It's a country full of many kinds of resources, including intellectual capacity. And we need to harness that in order to, including putting pressure on politicians to make the transition.
But once again, let me get back to, let me get her idea first. What is your idea of, the Kyoto Protocol and the ramifications that it has had? Arpana, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can hear you. See, the Kyoto Protocol started out really well, but it did not really take off from there because
Why
some
do you
of the
think that
countries.
happened?
Yeah, that because some of the countries never signed the Kyoto Protocol, and there was no, nobody can. I mean, if there is no political will and the countries are not really interested in, looking at how collectively we can combat climate change, then any protocol is not going to be really, really effective.
It's
So
really
what
a
is
give
that?
and take thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a give and take thing, and there was no schemes which were not really going to impact emissions in a big way took off, but a lot of contentious issues is where Kyoto Protocol got stuck. And today we are in a position where if we do not have any agreement by 2015, then we really don't know where we go from there. And there is also fears that there are huge fears of really watered down version of an agreement that might emerge in 2015. So, and also a lot of people are now not really they're disillusioned by the whole Kyoto Protocol, to all the climate agreement summits. That a lot of people are disillusioned, and the faith has gone down quite a bit about it, that is the platform that will bring about collective action on climate change.
Karthik, let me ask you this. Do you think the fact that the US is out of it, do you think that has caused this loss of faith this lack of the trust deficit that you talked about. What is the way forward? Once again, I'm asking you this because, you know, I think it's very important to drive it in to all of us, into all of our heads, that it is a global issue. It is something where all countries need to come forward to fight it and to ensure that, you know, clean technology, green technology is being used. How does one really combat the trust deficit that has emerged?
Yes, and I think, you know, as with any international agreement, you feel a little cheated
Yes.
when you are asked to partake, when people who are emitting more than you are left out of the equation.
Right.
And I think that has been a driver of the trust deficit, the fact that the United States, and for some time Australia even, was not a party to the Kyoto Protocol.
Yes.
At the same time, during that decade of inaction, China propelled itself to become the #1 emitter of carbon dioxide. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, India, because of some similar characteristics with China, population and all of that, has been clubbed with China.
Yes.
And really, now a large chunk of global emissions are coming from 2 countries, and whatever the gridlock is, its solution will definitely have to involve those 2 countries.
Yes.
And that, and I believe they're working on bilateral issues. Let's hope that they come towards something that's acceptable to both those 2 economies, which are so inextricably linked in the consumption and production paradigm.
India has always said that it needs more time. It needs more time because it's a developing country. It needs more time. So, how do you think more developed countries with higher GDPs can assist in this process?
Well, I mean, I think there have been, one of the ways is through technology transfer agreements, through joint innovation centers. Some of these things have been talked about in the ongoing negotiations through the technology transfer mechanism. But in addition to that, I think India needs to, we're not a poor country, we're poorly managed. And I think we need to mobilize our resources in a way to make the most of that limited time that we have. We argue for equity at the international level, and that is just. But there is a great inequity when we're back in our own domestic quarters between the 2 Indias that exist here.
More than 2 Indias, actually. I mean, there's so much consumption in our cities, and at the same time, we have 400 million people who don't have electricity.
Access to electricity,
and I think
right.
Another thing that's really important about renewable energy is that it will make us self-sustainable.
Absolutely.
If we are using
don't have to
more
be so
solar,
dependent.
yes.
Arpana, let me get your last comments on that. Self-sustainability. How does one achieve that?
I think it has to be very clearly with energy efficiency and renewable energy. And if you look at, if we are very serious about energy security, then we will definitely not look at coal, because we really have less of it, and we really have bad quality of it. And in the end, we will end up importing it and increasing electricity costs, which has already happened with Adani and Tata, because they ended up importing coal, and they were allowed by CERC, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, to increase their tariffs. So I think we need to really, the current solar mission only looks at projects. It does not look at strengthening, solar manufacturing capabilities in India. Yeah, it does not look at how you are going to look at wind. It does not. Also, they are not really looking at how renewable energy can reach rural areas faster than the grid, and ensure that at least you ensure supply, and then you ensure connection to the larger grid.
Great.
So,
Arpana, these were very, very wonderful and valid points that you gave us. Thank you so much. That's all we have time for. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. I would also like to thank Kartikeya and Neha for coming in. We just have this much time. This is a huge issue. It is an issue that actually one could talk about for hours on end, trying to find the way out, trying to find the solution. But definitely we have put some of our thoughts into this, and I'm sure that all those who are listening in, all those who've heard it, will take some time to think about it as well. And maybe we will move forward towards a cleaner and a healthier world. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for watching.